Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the ISCM Virtual Town Hall on supply chain planning during COVID-19 and the lessons for the future. You want the next slide, please? The Institute of Supply Chain Management is a thought leadership institute focused on education, training, research, and consulting in the domain of supply chain. In the Institute of Supply Chain Management, we created a Center of Excellence called Demand Planning Academy, which is focused on supply chain planning, SNOP, and IBP as the core areas of our operations. The Demand Planning Academy offers a series of town hall events like what we are having today with eminent planners to bring in various aspects of demand planning, SNOP, and IBP to a larger audience. This also is a dialogue between the Demand Planning Academy and the practitioners to evolve best practices for the same. The other activity that we do under the Demand Planning Academy are, we have two certifications, the certification of demand planning and forecasting called Certified Demand Planning and Forecasting Professionals, of which there are around 40 people who have qualified. And we are also offering one on IBP. So there's a Certified IBP Professional too. And the latest offering that we have is SCM Pro Knowledge, a portal for the supply chain community. And if you log on to www.scmpronowledge.in, you will get to read views and opinions from a wide cross-section of industry experts on relevant issues. So please log on to scmpronowledge.in. The next slide, please. Without taking much time, I would now like to go straight and invite our panelists or introduce our panelists to you so that we can have a healthy discussion. We have with us today Kunal Gupta, Director of Supply Chain for Bateel's Global Operations. Kunal is a dynamic and result-oriented professional with over 17 years of global experience across supply chain, logistics, food and beverage industries. Kunal incidentally is based out of Dubai. We have with us Pankaj Shete, Vice President Supply Chain at Walmart. 20 years of all-round experience in supply chain and procurement in the world's largest food company and retail organization. Experience includes corporate and upstream supply chain management, lean supply chain, corporate procurement. We have with us Sanjay Awasthi, Vice President Supply Chain at Valvoline, an ambitious and optimistic supply chain professional with 28 years experience leading various companies including Hindustan Coca-Cola, Hindustan Unilever, and currently associated with Valvoline. And we have Vickram Srivastava, Head of Planning, Supply Chain Management, IPCA Laboratories, whose expertise is in supply, demand planning, strategic sourcing, vendor development, inventory management, and logistics. We have one more panelist who will be joining us today, Shashank Raodeo, Senior General Manager, Supply Chain Management at Mahindra and Mahindra. He will join in a little later. He is a seasoned professional who has been a close associate of ISCM. The session today will be moderated by Dr. Rakesh Singh, Chairman, ISCM and Dean Demand Planning Academy, an author, researcher, thought leader, consultant who has taught in some of the best B schools across the world and some of the best corporates across the globe. I invite Dr. Singh to take over the proceedings for the day. Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Girish.
Welcome, sir.
The video is not turning on.
Yes, the video is not turning on. There is a problem today.
Okay, all right. So, good afternoon, everybody. And as Girish said, ISCM Demand Planning Academy invites you to this first ISCM virtual town hall. And in the first virtual town hall, we let it have a free flow discussion on supply chain planning during COVID-19 and the lessons that we can draw for future. To put the thing in context, if you see today 193 countries are under lockdown, affected by coronavirus to a very great degree and extent, and the nature of this the infection is very unknown, and hence it has had a very unknown impact on the supply chain, which we have hardly experienced in the history. It started with China and has spread to the whole world. It looked like as if China supplies to rest of the factories of the world, and this is going to be a supply problem. But because of the dynamic length and the nature of this pandemic, it has actually affected the overall demand globally. And not only just demand temporarily because of this pandemic, but it seems it will have a very uh, unintended consequences of the economies of the world. And if you see major predictors of the global economy, they've already spelled doom, and they've said that the economy is not, economy will undergo a huge recession with different degree of impact on recession. And where their infections are high, the recession's length may be high, and not only the length, the deep-rooted risk for businesses and for human beings may be very high. And in that sense of the term, we thought that let us look at how businesses have really managed their supply chain during this pandemic, because we have seen that government across the world has been very agile, with some degree of criticism that can always be hurled on any government in the world, but they've been very agile. They've been trying to balance life and livelihoods. They're trying to balance how do we really kick off the economies during the period of pandemic as pandemic spreads. And you've seen a very strong uh, approach towards balancing these two, despite we are in a very confused and unknown state, as I said earlier. Amidst this, how has supply chain, behaved? Because I use the word behave because all of us do not know. We have been behaving every day as the behavior of the surrounding and the ecosystem involves with our supply chain also has become so agile. And I think that's one of the most beautiful part of this thing. What different firms, whether it be a retail firms like Bateel or a food firm like Bateel or a retail firm like Walmart, a Valvoline which deals with large set of agribusinesses, or Mahindra which looks in auto, or medical supplies or agribusinesses, how have they actually managed this crisis? And the impact of this crisis, I think, has been varied on different kind of industries and different kind of sub part of the industry, depending upon where they have been essentials, where they have been non-essentials, where they are located, their major markets are located, and so on. So in the first phase, what we have thought is that let us explore planning. Now, as we have seen planning, people have a lot of doubts about planning. What do you plan in such a disrupted, unknown environment? How do you plan? Do my assumptions of earlier days planning, base planning, remains true? How do you plan my supplies? How do I plan my, last tire supplies? How do I plan my production? How do I plan my trucks? How do I plan my distribution network, last mile delivery? How do I plan my demand and understand demand? And I think it's a very, very strong integrated framework that comes to one's mind when one looks at planning. So I thought to start with, we'll take up one of the most important uh, industry in this pandemic, medical, and I invite Vickram uh, to be the first one to look at it. And Vickram, yours is a very special hydrochloroquine has been produced by IPCA. Now, there has been medical facilities will always be required, medicines will always be required, and there is also a characteristics of one which is go to drug today. So, what are your views on supply disruption brought about by coronavirus, and how has IPCA dealt with supply planning? So, Vickram,
Sure.
here you go.
Good evening, Dr. Singh. Thanks for extending this platform to share our views and how we have actually dealt with the pandemic so far. And very warm welcome to all attendees and my co-panelists. So my starting remark is we used to funnily say that we are all in the same boat. So but now during the pandemic, I'm hearing a new term. We are not in the same boat. We are all in the same storm. So across industries, across verticals, across functions, across geographies worldwide, like Dr. Singh mentioned in his opening remark, everybody is impacted. We are seeing the true impact of globalization now. I mean, this pandemic has opened our eyes to new terms like deglobalization. I'm not sure how far true it is going to be, but COVID has completely disrupted even pharma supply chain, IPCA, or you have to say about generic pharma supply chain. Being in the essential services did not help us get away from the impact of this pandemic and the lockdown. Like Dr. Singh mentioned, initially we all thought it's going to be a supply disruption with China being impacted majorly, and as we know in the pharma industry, it is globally divided into two big chunks. China being the active and the KSM ingredient supplier, and India being the formulation supplier. So when this pandemic started, we thought that we are going to face some supply challenges with respect to availability of actives and ingredients, but very quickly we were to realize that it's not just the supply, it's also the demand, and that makes this entire COVID a very unique event. Like they say, it's like a black swan event, rarest of the rarest, where both your supply and demand have been equally impacted, and upstream and downstream both on your value chain, you don't know which pockets to block and which holes to plug. So dealing in this scenario, I would say is in a very quick three-phase scenario, as I look at it, is number one, we all were in it through the lockdown. We are still in the lockdown, so that impact on my supply and demand has been tremendous. Though on the supply side of it, we have recovered a little bit with the government relaxing transportation norms and for the ancillary industries also. But in the short to near term, I see a little bit of a demand volatility. I heard Dr. Singh talk about HCQS. HCQS has been very difficult to plan for. What we have been doing for hydrochloroquine right now is manufacture to capacity to all the materials that we have to full capacity. We have been dedicating our manufacturing resources to ensure that across the globe, whatever shortages are coming through on hydrochloroquine and chloroquine, we are able to fulfill. And in the mid to long range, what we as an industry and as a company are looking at, how this corona is going to impact our future business. I mean, is this going to be the new norm? Contactless, forums, contactless business development. How are we going to approach our new customers? How are we going to approach new distributors? So these are some of the challenges that we are looking at, some of the questions that we have in mind. Thank
you, Vickram. We'll come back to you later. Let me call upon Sanjay Awasthi from Valvoline. Sanjay, welcome. And if I look at your product portfolio, you have a very defined range of products for agriculture, industry, mining, construction, power generation, road vehicles. And I think it is one of the most essential activities for the, the whole industry and logistics to go. What has been the experience of managing supply? What has been the strategy adopted only on the supply side of it? How have you managed the supply shock to see this? And what has been the policy to do with supply risk? Because suddenly, if large amount of supplies come from China and then there's sudden lockdown, the world is the trade is closed, then how do you really manage this?
Yeah, sure. So good evening to all. I hope I am audible.
Yeah, you are audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So everybody, there is enough background on COVID-19 and 19, and we know there is a uncertainty and difficult to estimate it. So what we did when this all started in China, so there are China learning, and I'm sure many of the company they started learning from China the moment we realized this is no more a China problem and this is going to cross the China border. So everybody started building different scenarios, and one of them was of course possible lockdown, and it was coming. So everybody knew that some point of time country will get into lockdown. So and we know the repercussion of lockdown. The moment lockdown comes, it will disrupt completely your supply side and of course demand side. So we were of course worried about the supply side first to secure the supplies. To manage a supply shock, what we did first step was to have a complete visibility of inventories across supply chain. And when I say complete visibility, it starts from vendor to warehouses to some of the select customers. And this was required basically to ensure continuity of production and customer service. And in this process, what we did, we relaxed some of the inventory norms. And why we need to do that? Reason is that focus on supply chain optimization in past, to minimize the cost, to reduce the inventory, to improve the asset utilization, and so on. This all has taken out entire buffer from the system, and when there is no buffer, it's difficult to absorb this kind of disruptions. So that's why we have to relax the inventory norms. Next step was to assess the supplier risk. So we created a complete transparency on a multi-tier upstream. When I say multi-tier upstream is a supplier, and so on. So we assess the supplier source and secured it. And in some cases, we have to identify an alternative supplier. And many of the cases, we have to find a substitute for the raw material or a packaging material. So that is what we did. And since we started early, so there was a time to do this kind of homework. We started having a close monitoring of suppliers who are into a red zone or containment area, and wherever we perceived the more risk, we did some pre-buying or some of the pre-production. So like this is how we could ensure the supplies for the future. I'll take one more minute. So there was third step which was related with the production scheduling agility. Since most of us working on a demand driven supply chain right now, so we have to keep validating our production plan or schedule, because here that will not work. It's so uncertain. So we have to work on a all demand driven supply chain. So with lockdown, all the local authorities, they came up with the different advisories, and because of that, production capacity was restricted. It's restricted not only for us, for our vendors also. Many of these guys are working with a 25% of the capacity. So it applies to us also. So so our objective was to maximize production. So what we did, one is that temporarily we have rationalized the SKUs. There is so much variety. Probably at this point of time, what is critical, that is what you need to pick. So that is what we did. Second, we combined some of the packs for the same product. If there are different pack sizes for the same product, we combine that so that it simplifies your entire production process. It reduces the changeover times. It reduces the packaging material complexity. Also explored if we can run a plant during the break time. So this was another thing. And last point, which is last but not least, is protect and support employees. When we started, there are a lot of guidelines as a preventive measures, and if a slightest gap will lead to a major disruption. So obviously we need to re-educate, and it was not an easy task, because this is a new way of working, and it involved a lot of change management, and it took some time. So these are the few things which we
All right.
Supply chain.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think good point of multi-tier risk and deep tier risk assessment. We'll come back to it later while we talk about integrated supply chains. Let me go back to Kunal Gupta from Bateel. Hi, Kunal. Thank you for joining. I see Bateel has a very wide variety of products. They say shop outline, cafe, customized gift, dates, and I think exotic dates, and not only dates, the date boxes, and so on and so forth. What has been the impact of pandemic on your supply chain, largely from the supply shock side? And how do you see the supply side shock playing it out itself in the future?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Singh. Thank you for having me over. So yes, I think I'll begin with the first point. Like you mentioned, Bateel is very diversified in terms of portfolio. So for all of those who are not fully aware, Bateel is UAE headquartered company which we are into luxury retailing of dates. And we have operate retail outlets across 10 countries, and we have cafes in about 3 countries in the Middle East. Plus, we have a fair amount of presence in e-commerce, as well as we have FMCG distribution. So as you notice, we have pretty much our hands in the complete pie all over the place. Of course, we are predominantly a food company. So the first effect, as you know, on from a demand perspective, the demand completely went low. I mean, the major effect of a lockdown is, apart from the essential basic commodities, which is predominantly your grocery market, everything else goes down. I mean, that becomes second priority for people. So yes, we were affected from that perspective. Another interesting part from our supply chain perspective, we have a very, very vast supply chain in terms of procuring. So all our food is bought pretty much from Europe, which is between France and Italy. All our packaging is from China and other countries. So there we started facing supply issues the moment it started from China. And then obviously second one was Italy, France. So pretty much initially I thought it's targeting the countries of our sourcing, particularly. It was kind of a thing between our teams we were thinking. But okay, so how basically, your second part of your question, how did we come over in terms of what kind of shocks? So initially we had a problem of only demand, like I said, but supply per se was not a problem, because I'll highlight, see, UAE is a slightly different market from India. I mean, India is a much bigger mammoth to manage. UAE, it is dependent on 90% of the food is imported into the country. So like everybody else, we have a kind of a very long planning process. So at any point of time, we have 2 to 4 months of stock in our warehouse, another maybe a month of stock in transit, and then few months with the vendor in production. So, I think at any point of time, for us to have a disruption in supply, it kind of that will take anywhere from 4 to 6 months for us to see the effect, which is not even past. So from a supply perspective, if anything, we have oversupply at the moment, but that's only short term, like I said, from 4 to 6 months. I think then possibly the scenarios will change. Where I see the kind of from a perspective of managing this risk, I think there are a couple of things we had to do. One thing, to begin with, of course, we have to take care of our excess inventory. Food is like a ticking time bomb in anybody's warehouse, where if you don't utilize it, it will go expired and you can't really do much about it after that. So we found a way to either promote it or give it out to charities. There are a lot of people who are in need of food, and this is the least we can do, from a humanitarian point of view. So we are really working on that, in giving away both meals states and so on and so forth. Then we, of course, worked on our people and production shifts and split, like my colleague just mentioned earlier. I think we're constantly been working on alternate vendors, but now we are looking at alternate countries for sourcing, and then there is a big focus on going local. I mean, though difficult in UAE, but you'll be surprised that the amount of food that is grown in UAE also, there is a very high focus on growing a lot of food within the country. So a lot of basic fruits and vegetables and even leafy fruits and vegetables are being produced by hydroponics and so on and so forth. So, and of course, revamping the whole offering. I mean, relooking at the menu, downsizing the offering is these are a couple of things that we are doing. Yes, please.
All right, thank you, Kunal. Thanks for bringing that perspective of looking at sourcing from different countries and local sourcing. I think that's one issue after post-pandemic, and the geopolitics of it also is showing the direction that may be a reality to a great extent. Obviously, China has its own economies of scale advantages and its own ports, and the way they have developed infrastructure may not be easy to replicate and move very quickly. But I think that's one way of looking at diversifying risk and mitigating risk in the future. Pankaj is from Walmart, and Pankaj, in fact, you are the one who would have seen a large amount of changing dynamics of consumer behavior across category, and how your stores are replenishing these categories. But to start with, in this particular first part of it, I would ask you a question: that what are the identified supplier risks or supply chain shocks, if any, that Walmart and your division especially faced? Pankaj, are you there? Pankaj, can you hear me? Hello? Pankaj? All right, I think we have lost him. As soon as he comes in back, we are going to, invite him to speak on this. In fact, given this supply shock, I think we did get some kind of answers. But how have businesses maintained their business continuity during the whole lockdown period in India? And I would start with Vickram to really respond to this, because Vickram, though you said suppliers, you look more into hydrochloroquine and all those other things. Can you say, in a pharma, when your dependence on China is very high, what has been your strategy to create business continuity?
Yeah, I mean, see, in pharma, it is not really very easy, nor it is cheap, nor it is quick to, change your sources, because you have qualified vendors there, you have regulatory pathway approvals. So it's not really very quick, and, we cannot be very responsive in changing our sourcing. But having said that, like I was saying in the first part of my, brief, predominantly the world supplies for pharmaceuticals is divided into all the actives and ingredients, active ingredients and key starting material coming from China, and all the finished goods coming from India. But during this pandemic, what we have noticed, and we've also seen a proactive, support from the government, where there is a strong push now to look at places in India where we can set up these pockets where we can start manufacturing chemicals, we can start manufacturing the key starting material. We start looking at onshoring rather than offshoring. We can start looking at different local vendors who can support our requirement. So to sum it up, it's there is an intent to de-risk and move away from China, but for the pharma industry per se, it's going to be a long drawn process, which is going to be both time consuming and involving a lot of costs. And having said that, still we are not sure if the other source can be cost competitive, because the economies of scale and the infrastructure that China has built around the chemical supplies throughout the globe, and the kind of infrastructure they have built is something that will be difficult to meet from a point of view.
All right, thank you, Vickram. I think, Kunal, you said something very interesting, and let me go back on that part of the supply, shock. You said for 4 or 5 months you have enough supply, but why do you say that 4 or 5 months later there could be a risk of supplies? And what are the factors that will play out in managing the supply in the long run?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Singh again. I think, yes, see, this is, I think the favorite word of everybody is unprecedented. So I'll say it again. Everything is unprecedented about this, whether it's demand, whether it's supply, the way we will do demand planning. I think the risk, like you said, 4 or 5 months, I am pretty sure, because we have access, that 4 or 5 months stock today probably can go up to 8 or 9 months because of the reduced demand. But eventually, when it opens back, the effect will be later seen. Now, when the countries are opening again, we don't know what kind of production capacity they will come back with. We don't know what kind of pricing strategy they will come back with. And more importantly, we don't know what are going to be the restrictions on the exports and the import for the countries. I mean, that all these put together create a factor which affects our supply and demand. I mean, to give you the latest example, yesterday Saudi Arabia overnight announced that they will triple the VAT from 1st of July, which is from 5% to 15%. Now imagine that what effect is going to have on the residents there. So I mean, this is just a beginning. It really depends on how agile a government is. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, the governments in the Middle East, because the country's sizes are small, they are extremely agile, and they are very autonomous in the way they run. So they can make decisions and they are implemented very quickly. So this has a huge impact on how things are going to go. I think a couple of things I feel we should also be looking at from a demand planning perspective, which is what our subject is all about, is we need to probably come back to the basics, the basics about what a management feel is going to be. Your guess is as good as my guess. Probably a lot of our existing models of forecasting will not work.
We'll come back to that. Kunal, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that
Yes.
in a while.
Okay, perfect.
Pankaj, Shete, can you hear me? Are you in the speaker panel? I think you have you muted yourself. If you can unmute and try again answering the question. I think there are some technical difficulties today in GoToWebinar, but we'll go back to Sanjay. Sanjay, once again, I want to take you back to the question of the supply shock. You said that you moved very quickly. You saw the trend from the China market, the incidence of diseases. They're going all around the world. India would be affected, and hence you moved into alternative supply this thing, and you mapped your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplies. But are these sustainable? Suppose the pandemic goes for a longer period of time. There is a reverse of pandemic. Is this sustainable over a period of time?
Yeah, so we built up some inventory and we did some pre-production, so we could manage initial lockdown, and thereafter this slowly economy is getting opened up, and with that we are able to get our supplies are getting resumed, and we have those alternative suppliers, and they are sustainable at this point of time. But of course, for our key raw material which we import, and that is what we have to see. But good thing is that ports are operational now, and so all the export and import started, and we operate through the sea route. So the shipping companies, they started operation, so it looks to be sustainable. So that is on a supply side, but from a demand per se,
let's look at demand side a little later. You know,
okay.
I'll get those things bundled into the demand side this thing, and I will try again to get another panelist, Shashank Raodeo. Shashank, can you unmute yourself? We see you in the panel. Shashank, can you hear us? I think there are some problems still.
Yeah,
Shashank,
and
can you hear?
so, yeah, Rakesh, I can hear you, and I've just been unmuted by the organizer. Yeah, please go ahead.
No. So I think these are disruptions, you know, of technological disruptions. Though technology has helped a lot of things, at times it could be, you know, troublesome. Shashank, we were discussing
Yeah,
about
so,
supply shocks. You have been hearing all these things from an auto perspective, you know, because it has been totally into a lot of the problems right since the beginning of the financial year. So, what are your views on the supply side and supply shocks, and how auto industry will manage that? Maybe a longer term perspective can also be taken.
yeah, so to begin with, Rakesh, honestly, yeah, we are learning to work from home. And this WFM has two connotations. One is work from home, and other is work from for home. So we are trying to learn both the things, you know, doing some things at home also now. Yeah, now coming to the subject, see, as everyone said, this is a supply uncertainty of a scale that we haven't ever experienced before in our working lives. We are used to, handling uncertainties on the demand side, but supply sides are normally pretty stable. So this is a new thing for us. And whenever, as somebody said, whenever you are facing a challenge, best is to go back to the basics. And if you look at how do we handle uncertainty in a normal environment, is either first we increase our inventories, especially if you are handling uncertainties on the supply side, increase your inventories. Of course, in this scenario, this is a suicidal approach. You just cannot work on the mantra today is conserve your resources. So that option is absolutely not available. The other thing is that you must plan frequently when you are faced with huge uncertainties and the rate of change is very high. So normally, as companies, we are used to planning 11 times in a year. Most of the companies follow a monthly kind of planning module. In our company, we generally do it week-wise, so we plan 51 times in a week. But in the current scenario, I think the only way out here is to plan on a daily basis. If not on a daily, it has to be an hourly basis. So if you look at the supply side, keep on plan, replan is the mantra right now. And how far you should look into the supply side is, if you look at the SCORE model, the supply chain operations reference model, it tells you that you must look at least to your supplier and to your supplier's supplier. That should be your visibility. Now, in this scenario, I think you have to go to your supplier, your supplier's supplier, and your supplier's supplier also. So what we need to continuously do, and what we are doing right now, is mapping all our suppliers, whether they are in the containment zone, what is the level that they are able to get the manpower, plus their suppliers and their suppliers' suppliers. This also, the current challenge, other challenges that not only the scene is difficult in India, but it's equally or more difficult abroad. So we have to look at the lockdown dates or the scenarios in each of the countries. So what is happening with the lockdown in Malaysia? What is happening in Germany? What is happening in UK, US, so on and so forth, and try to see how you can, continuously change your so the ability to change fast is what is going to help right now. but all this has to be like on a personal front. I'm trying to build up my immunity now. I'm sure all of us are. So a lot of vitamin C, etc., etc. But you obviously cannot build up immunity just like that. It has to be a sustained approach over a period of time. And those companies who have been working on providing flexibility, or the supply chains who have been working on providing flexibility in the past, have a definite edge over those who have been rigid in their approach to the customer. So if you look at the five high top level matrices: reliability, response, flexibility, costs, and asset management, flexibility is the key issue right now that we must concentrate on. And here there are two things: what is your upside adaptability, and what is your downside adaptability. So these are the things that we have to look into. And coming back to the basics, I think collaboration and visibility are also the old mantras that we need to again bring up and ensure that we are continuously communicating with our suppliers, and also we are being completely visible. So that's the take from our side, Rakesh.
Right. Thank you, Shashank, for bringing basics of the so difficult element of alignment within the supply chain, and lastly on the supply side, where cost becomes overriding thing, and people start looking at cost, looking at relation in relationship, and end up with a lot of problems of not really having the visibility across the supply chain, largely multi-tier risk, because the risk can happen at the fourth tier or fifth tier, and you may be thinking that there's a reliable supply at tier 1. What happened to Intel during the earthquake in Japan in 2011 could be devastating for any organization. Now let me move to the second side of the planning. We have looked at supply chain planning. Shashank and rest of you brought the clearer point of mapping. Mapping means visibility. What is the challenges to demand planning? I think are deterministic models going to play a big role in future? Maybe yes or no. But in the short run and immediate future, are these models going to really play a big role? I will start with Kunal here, primarily because Kunal wanted to touch on the models and this thing. So let's, Kunal, have your views for 2 minutes on this.
Yeah, I think, can I first request everybody to mute their mics so that it's a little less noise? There's a lot of noise in the background. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so like I was saying, Dr. Singh, it requires a lot of change in the mindset or the way we are looking at the whole demand planning. I think it was rightly touched upon right now that it's probably a time where you should just increase the frequency of your planning, because you cannot plan for too long. I mean, the shorter the things, the smaller the order size could be. Probably it's better for everybody, because it's not nobody is in a position to take huge risks at the moment. So I think it has to go back to the basics, where it has to be a lot of manual intervention, a lot of feel from the management, a lot of a gut feel on which you work on. Maybe a lot of forecasting principles and formulas will not work. I think an extremely important factor in the whole of this is this human element, or rather I would say a vendor relationship element, which is very part of planning, I would say. Now, planning is not only about just generating a number or doing some mathematical. It's about when you have these smaller orders, when you have delays in payments, when you have MOQs that have to be worked around. Ultimately, it's your vendor relationship, how you manage with the guys that you're working with for many years. I think this is also a time where we need to relook at our relationships with the vendors, how we can strengthen it more than rather breaking it, because it's a very fragile time. It's a delicate time for everybody. I don't have an answer of what is the best way, but at least the way we are doing it, we are trying to give them assurance across the globe, local vendors, international vendors, asking them about their health, trying to see how we can help, and telling them that this will pass through and eventually we will work again, with maybe reduced volumes. But I think it's extremely important to keep those relationships intact, which is going to be a very, very important factor going forward. So I think these are a couple of things which will make a lot of difference in the way we do planning and procurement going forward. Am I with you guys, Dr. Singh?
Yeah, Kunal, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah,
Dr. Singh, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, there are technological challenges today as we are facing. So yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, I was unmuted by the organizers. There's a lot of disturbance, and I think that's playing out. And they are working on each second planning to put all the panelists into place. So,
yeah.
In fact, I can see Pankaj in the speaker panel. If Pankaj can unmute himself and come back to the speakers panel. Pankaj, welcome. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. I hope you are able to hear me now.
Yes, we are able to hear you. Pankaj represents Walmart here. And Pankaj, as he comes from a retail chain, there is a huge dynamic of consumer category consumption challenges, packaging size challenges, channel selection challenges, shopper trip frequency, brand performance. All these we see is changing. Pankaj, I will now straight away move into how have your division managed this kind of challenges in the current pandemic in terms of managing the demand and in terms of consumer behavior changes?
Yeah, sure. Finally, we are able to connect. Apart from the demand and supply, we have technological volatility also impacting our day-to-day working. And all this while in last 45 to 60 days, we have seen tremendous amount of volatility in demand, trends changing. From the normal sale to probably doubling up of sales, because when the things were becoming hot on COVID, people started hoarding up stocks, stocking up their staples, ration, etc. That's when we saw almost doubling up of sales. Thereafter, the restrictions started playing, and that's when everybody started suffering. The number of hours our stores could remain open, social distancing norm meant that we could not operate with full strength. Our suppliers were working with 50% of their capacity. All that simultaneously playing, we have seen that within this also there has been one trend that has come up very, very clearly, is that in the supply constraint situation, one peculiar behavior that we have seen from our customers is that the customers are a bit brand agnostic in this situation, and therefore that made the job of retail supply chain slightly easier, I would say, than the brand supply chains. Is that we moved our way of forecasting or demand for planning from item level or SKU level to a category level. Earlier we would say that out of say 5 or 6,000 SKUs, how many are available at least for 3 or 4 days of sale. Now we are talking about for a given category, say for example biscuits, if our last 3 days sale is say 100,000 rupees, how many what is the value of the biscuits total stock that we have in a store, and can we support at least a week's sales for our customers? So that has brought in a bit of flexibility. However, I completely agree with Kunal. With the volatility, the planning cycles have shortened. Gone are those days when we would look at the demand once in a month or once in a week. We are having to look at and refresh the system once a day, make those changes. A lot of manual intervention, as my panelists members also said, that it involves a lot of manual intervention. So we moved from SKU to category. We moved from weekly to daily refreshment of demand. Also, we have seen that the e-commerce sale picking up tremendously during this period, which meant that customers were asking for handful of products, and they were essential product, high focus category. So within that, we were able to make choices and prioritize the products or categories which are important for our customers. So making choices, category level planning, more frequent planning is what we are responding to the current situation to meet our customer requirements, is what I would say at this stage. Dr. Singh?
Sorry, I was muted. So,
Sure.
thank you, Pankaj, for bringing about the dynamics of retail supply chain in terms of moving from SKU to category, in terms of essentials, becoming more prominent, deploying all the resources toward this, and also a very strong move towards e-commerce fulfillment because of the nature of the pandemic. So that's a good way of looking at the changes in the basic dynamics of fulfilling demand. Now, as Kunal rightly said, most biggest enemy of forecasting is uncertainty, and hence even Shashank and Pankaj have said, how do you make this uncertainty more variable in nature of variability, so that we can manage the variability and we are not very scared of the uncertainty and unknown of unknowns that really haunt us. Shashank brought about a very important point of bringing in flexibility and agility. Those companies which have flexibility and agility and responsiveness have done better even this point of time. Maybe if you do a cost benefit analysis, they have performed definitely better, and this has been even reports across this thing. But let me go now to Sanjay Awasthi from Valvoline. Sanjay, you made a very strong reference to DDMRP, which is seen as bringing flexibility, as Shashank is saying. What do you think that will demand-driven MRP approach be the way to go in future during the pandemic in terms of planning your supply chain? Sanjay.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, definitely it will be. So before that, just I would like to mention how are we managing this currently. So currently we have to. I think there is some background noise coming here.
Can every speaker mute himself?
Yeah, thanks. It's good now. Yeah, so we have to come to a very realistic demand. So that's why we are. I don't know why it is coming like this echo kind of thing. Okay, so we have to come to very realistic customer demand. So this is something which we did through the hello. Yeah, so now this is better. Thanks. So first we came to a very realistic customer demand. So so this is something which we did through the demand sensing. And when we say demand sensing, we have various tools to find it out, and we have a regular discussion with the distribution partners and the sales team. So as everybody is working on that, entire planning cycle has shortened. So we identify some of the critical customers, and we put them on a monitoring list. There was a good amount of communication to build the confidence among the customers. We did some changes in our distribution side, because as many of the others mentioned about that, there is a good amount of inventory So here also it's with us basically, but it was spread all across the warehouses. So we have to service customer from a multiple warehouses. So we have to change our transportation model, and you know, on this conventional SNOP process, probably going forward is more of a guiding kind of thing. So where you can do some resource planning, but for all practical purpose, we have to get into a demand-driven supply chain. Yeah. Hello. Hello, Dr. Rakesh.
Hello, can you hear me? Can I be
Yeah, I
heard?
can.
Yes, yeah, we can now.
Sorry. Yeah, Vickram, can you tell us about demand planning approaches in terms of your different kind of products that I talked in the beginning? The one which had a huge demand and then the rest of them, and how do you manage that during the pandemic?
Yeah, sure, Dr. Singh. I mean, we've all been talking about, DDMRP. I think, that is the future of planning, closer to the market, and, being able to sense the demand more proactively so that you plan properly. Having said that, I don't think so in this current scenario, DDMRP, IBP or SNOP can help, because the kind of volatility that we've seen even in the pharma generic space has been very difficult to predict demand, especially for hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, the two probably drugs which were, which are supposed to be, used actively as a treatment, first line of treatment in COVID. So like I was mentioning at the start of my, brief, we had a very simplistic approach to this problem: convert whatever raw material we have and, start producing tablets. We had supply challenges with respect to, availability of packing materials, printed components, and even availability of skilled laborers at our manufacturing locations to, produce these tablets. But I would say the organization, the industry per se, has shaped up to this concern very well. We were able to convert whatever material we had to fulfill the requirements, not just for the domestic consumption in India, but across the globe. So I mean, forecasting, DDMRP, everything has its space, time and space in the supply chain, function. But at this point of time, we were kind of found ourselves wanting to see how we can approach this, this unique occurrence, because nobody was prepared. I mean, including us, to this kind of supply chain disruption.
Thank you, because that's integrated tactical planning that you observe. But I see a strong element of SNOP, because it was everything dependent upon capacity. And if capacity was defining this, there's some amount of IBP working or SNOP working in terms of you knowing what you could do in this thing. Kunal, there has been a huge upsurge in your e-commerce, this thing, like Pankaj was talking about. Can you tell us what was the approaches that you adopted for meeting your e-commerce challenges during this period of time?
Yes, Dr. Commerce, you've touched upon, Dr. Singh, you've touched upon my favorite subject these days. I mean, I think it's pretty much for the whole management. It's the favorite topic we keep speaking about, because yes, we saw, I mean, not a 2 or a 3, it's a 4-digit growth in terms of percentage of e-commerce year on year. So I think quite a few things we did both as a short-term plan and a long-term plan. So the short-term was more like a crisis management, to be honest, because it was such a huge demand. I mean, it was almost 1500%, to be honest. So fortunately, because we had a lot of resources in various divisions, we could immediately divert them to meet that extra demand when it came to production, packing, logistics, and we could still meet. Of course, our lead time went a little higher. Normally, we'll do delivery within 2 days. It went up to 3 to 4 days because of the high demand. Then, obviously, the biggest learning from the lesson was that when you know the whole volume is overall low, you are not so focused on the processes and the technology. So a huge learning is how we use more of technology, how we can streamline the processes to make sure we are ready for the next surge. So immediately when the volumes have now stabilized back, we are now every day practically meeting and doing the plan and work in progress in terms of integrating more technology and better processes to take this. Yeah, that's how we want to take it forward.
Thank you, Kunal. Let me go back to Shashank. Shashank, you have seen a huge dip in demand historically for a year, and pandemic has been a blow on that this thing. How are you really looking at future where government after 3 lockdowns and there's a huge definition of gray, red, orange, and green zone? How are you looking at managing demand pan India and even across geography?
Yeah, so Rakesh, let me, I think there's something that was left unanswered or unaddressed was the DDMRP scenario. Okay, because it has an application here. Now, what is DDMRP? Okay, we all know what is MRP. MRP is a classical tool wherein when you have a firm plan or a very high level of reliability in your forecast, you run the MRP and then you create, the demand, the schedules on your suppliers, and you follow the plan. Now, right. If you see, MRP is a 1960 tool, and the world has changed, but MRP has remained the same. So, and if you really see the application of MRP, it's not really helped in improving the industry. Even in the US, the industry hasn't really benefited from MRP per se, except in scenarios where the demand is highly stable. Now, the other solution that the Japanese gave were the...
Shashank, let me intervene. I have a very simple query.
Yeah. So I'm coming to that. So I have to put up a, kind of a precursor to that. So the other approach has been the Kanban or the lean manufacturing kind of approach. Okay, wherein you take a, you use a continuous replenishment model, wherein whenever there is a consumption, you see a consumption signal and then only you produce. Okay,
right.
So this really helped the industry. It has helped in reducing the waste. Manpower has been reduced by almost 20-30% all across the world, and it has a huge following, the lean manufacturing approach. However, in lean manufacturing, the signal comes very late, because when you use the consumption as the point of for your backend, then it is too late to actually change, and that is where the DDMRP comes into the picture. When you do MRP, you end up into a huge bullwhip, because the lead time is very long. But when you do DDMRP, you are actually placing buffers at selected nodes. Okay, inventory buffers, which help you to replenish, meet the demand as well as replenish it in a manner where the efficiencies are maintained. So it's a best of both the worlds. That is the scenario. So if you talk about the current scenario, in my opinion, this is the best approach. That if you are facing so much uncertainty, you have to place buffers at appropriate nodes and ensure that you are able to cater to the demand, whereas on the other hand, not creating a huge inventory because of bullwhip. So it is the yeah. This is what was my answer to your question, is that the best, and we have been following this for quite some time now, and what we used to call it as the dynamic buffer management, where the buffers keep on changing on their own based on the demand that comes into the picture. So that is the kind of a dynamic buffer management approach that needs to be taken right now in this current scenario.
Right.
Yeah, Rakesh?
I think I'll go to Pankaj a little while and come back to you on my other question. Pankaj, what has been your view on DDMRP, in the sense that all the signals from consumer buying behavior changes have its own impact on consumer spending, merchandising, distribution, logistic within a retail. So how did you all manage this? Pankaj, are you there? Pankaj, okay, yeah, he's there. Can you hear me, Pankaj?
I can. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, perfect. As I said earlier, the way in which customers are shopping, the product they are shopping has changed, and that has led us to sharpen our list of products. I also wanted to mention about the fact that retailers like ours saw opportunity in homegrown products being sold as well. So because the customer behavior was towards brand agnostic, there was opportunity for retailer like ours to have their private brand products sold to our customers. So that saw a good amount of positive uplift during this period. And this is the supply chain that we manage end to end. So we were able to have a view on how much we could potentially sell in this situation through our channels. So that's one. The second is that the each and every signal that is there to act on, and all those meetings that government officials are having, the prime ministers are having, chief ministers are having, have one or the other action for all our stores. The day it is declared that the non-essential sales are opened, it means a lot for us because we are big aggregators of all categories, and they are external signals for us which are defining the demand. So I would say we have become more and more externally tuned organization to capture those demand signals. Today, it is not a demand generating event. It is the external permissions kind of a situation which is defining demand situation for us. So today,
Thank you.
we along with our sales team and the corporate affairs team, I would say, are working together very closely to anticipate what a particular notification from government would mean potentially for us in terms of capturing of demand. And thereafter, it is, I would still say it's a consensus demand on which we are working. The difference being that the discussion on consensus are happening far too frequently because that is the need of the hour, and that is something that we are pushing through our system. So that is about the demand part of it, but the supply part of it for us works based on the lead time, which is 7 days, 10 days, which has seen 5 or 6 consensus refreshments happening post that order has been given to our suppliers. So at times we have seen that not only demand but supply correction is also equally required. So we are, with the manual interventions, we are trying to capture demand as well as supply and fine tuning the response. Yep.
Thank you, Pankaj, for this insight. I'll go. This will be the last question as we have overrun our time and we are already 5:15. But I'll put this question to Shashank. We look at in a continuous manner. We see the changes as what Pankaj said. Shashank, what has been your approach to planning? Before you go, I think you can look at it, and what is your approach to immediate future planning in future? Shashank is there? Okay, sorry, Shashank has left because he has a meeting. Anyone who can take up this question? A question from the audience, so I thought that we'll put up. What would be the long-term planning in a market where the length and dynamic incidence of corona is very, very high? The first question from the audience that I will take it up.
So, Dr. Singh, I would want to respond to that from a generic pharmaceutical point of view and overall business point of view across industries. So the way I look at, I
have a request that we keep 1.5 minutes to each question.
Sure. So quickly answering to that, see, I look at this entire corona thing in 3 phases. One is absolute disruption, the phase in which we are in, where the supply chain got completely disrupted. The second phase I look at it is the demand volatility. I mean, we are all looking at coming out of the lockdown and then the demand getting back on track, or having a V or a U curve for the demand. And the third is going to be the most challenging, where the planning is actually going to come in and play, is what will be the new business paradigm. I mean, will the rules of engagement change? How do we plan for future? How do we look at new product launches? How do we approach our customers? Is it going to be contactless? Is it going to be telemedicine? So for me, that is going to be the real mid to long range challenge, where we'll have to work very closely with our customers and evolve planning as we go. So we'll have to see how we approach this going forward.
In fact, there's another question close to this from Neeraj Chaudhary. He says that we all know about pandemic disruption hitting supply chain multiple times in decades. Would like to understand your views how supply chains are innovating to minimize impacts apart from China alternate sourcing. So, Pankaj, can you take this? Pankaj or Sanjay, either of you?
Yeah, sure. One reflection on the long term is that long term is going to be series of short term, like it or not. We will have to take it as it comes in parts and then solve it part by part. That's point number one. Point number two, this you would have seen that right from the Prime Minister of the country to various officials, everyone in the country is talking about supply chain. So I see this as positive for the industry, where there is awareness about what supply chain can do and how it positively or negatively impacts the fate of organization. So I see a lot of risk mitigation and business continuity to kick in the supply chain. The supply chain will be designed in such a way that you are able to have at least one option to fall back on in the event of any disruption. So I see a lot of shift happening from most cost effective supply chain to most risk mitigating supply chain, to ensure that the customers and consumers are always serviced with the design of supply chain that you have. So these two trends I definitely see going forward, long term being series of short term, and right from the lowest cost supply chain to a supply chain design which is flexible enough to accommodate disruptions like this.
Thank you, Pankaj. And Sanjay, there is a question for you from Deepak Selvam. There will be price escalation for most of the chemical products which are majorly being sourced from China. How to curtail them? Also, logistics will be major concern. Post-lockdown, the shipping company will also charge tremendously. On wider picture, do we need to push out of China post-COVID-19, as India is the biggest importer from China? Sanjay.
Yeah. So only thing, we don't import anything from China. Our import is limited to nearby country, So at this point of time, there is no indication of any price increase from our suppliers. So we don't source it anything from China.
Okay. So anybody else want to take this question? What about Kunal?
Yeah, Dr. Singh, Kunal here. So, like I mentioned, it's not me or Bateel per se, but as a country, UAE is dependent 90% on import when it comes to food. So I think it is definitely something that is shaken up, which I said earlier also. So you need to look at alternate sourcing from the gentleman who's asked for the question. But having said that, it's not easy. See, like I think Dr. Singh, you mentioned, China has built that economies of scale and they have had the competitive advantage, which will not vanish overnight. I mean, even today, I saw the biggest disruption from China in February, end of January. I mean, when it started with Chinese New Year till end of February, but they were the first one to come out, and now they are probably absolutely back to normal. So, I mean, like I said, it's definitely advisable to look for alternate, but I think it's not going to be a short-term solution, more of a long-term solution, depending upon what product, what industry you are in, and do you really have alternate available. So I think it's kind of a combination of both.
Thank you, Kunal. There is another question, which is the question is from Rohan Mehta: how are companies adjusting to the supply chain disruption within India, different zones and different norms, and how they are coping up with major cities like Mumbai, Pune, Delhi being affected the most? Can anyone take it up? How are companies really looking at this disease infection and responding to the market? Rohan, I will take up this then in case of that. See, you have to build the scenarios and see which are the cities into red, orange, and green zones, which are the states which are doing well within even red, which are really red. For instance, Pune city is red, but Pune rural is not red. And you will have to plan for different scenarios. What is the best scenarios? What is the mid scenario? What is the worst scenario? And I think businesses will have to have scenario planning. And based on the scenario plan, geographies have to be identified, and their consumption pattern will have to be identified, because serving these geography within the regulation will be much easier. So scenario planning would be the best way to look at it. Your sales source, your dealers could be a great source of information, but even I've seen Map My India brings in the best maps which really map India on district and sub-district level where your planning can be done. So we'll take one more question from Nilesh Singh. As Kunal mentioned in his intro, demand for non-essential luxurious commodities has been adversely affected due to the pandemic. My question is how to take this change in demand into planning and forecasting models. Also, how long do the panelists think that this suppressed demand will be in effect? Kunal, can you take this?
Yes, for sure. I mean, that is a $1 million question, to be honest, Dr. Singh. But I think there are some logical inferences we all can take. It's very difficult for anybody to answer it very specifically, but it really depends. Like, say, for us in UAE, you have to understand this country depends a lot on tourism and global traveling, which I don't see personally happening or going back anywhere close to normal till the vaccine is out, which is about, I don't know, that also we don't know. So about a year from now or so. So that probably is one of the factors we need to consider. Then since it has not only affected travel, it has also affected every phase of human life. When it comes to, you see the amount of people losing jobs, 30 million jobs in US lost, in India 120 million because the number is bigger. So people are ultimately going back to absolute basics. And I think for a long time, even after things are back to normal, for people to spend on luxury or even travel tourism, which I also feel it's a form of luxury because it's something you can do without. It will not be easy for people to bounce back and start spending. So I think it is, you're talking about at least a year or two before things can even start looking better, really.
Okay, thank you, Kunal. And there is one question. Yeah, anybody wants to answer this? Pankaj, you were speaking. In case you want to make some points, you are welcome. Pankaj?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Pankaj. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So look, the way I see it is, I just want to quote example from US. 30 days or 35 days into the lockdown, the trend that we have seen ourselves in Walmart in US is that the next products which were flying off the shelf were hair colors. Now, people will move from bare essentials to the essential and then the impulse and discretionary. So the demand will broad base, but it will take time. And the way the restrictions are getting relaxed, I think people will broaden their demand requirement. There is a lot of postponement in demand that has happened. People are definitely waiting for things to become a bit normal so that they can go on with their lives. So I see broad base of demand going forward. And accordingly, we got to prepare ourselves for that situation to take place. It won't be thing as fast, but yes, we'll have to, as somebody said, we have to learn with new normal and deal with it as it comes. And again, one step at a time, I would say, review what is happening and then take course correction, because extrapolating the requirements or situation will not be wise, because we don't know what the future holds and how it impacts all of us going forward. So I would say that demand, going by what is happening outside, it will broad base, but one step at a time is what I would say.
Thank you, Pankaj. And I think the last question from Sunia, she says that, can we make use of DDMRB plus integrated business planning approach collectively to plan better? I think what a question to end with. So I can take Sanjay, as Awasthi and Vickram to speak on this. So Sanjay, can you take this question?
Yeah. So, so of course, this is a good idea, but the only thing in a current situation, I also don't know how this two can be integrated. So, because one talks about the long term and then resource planning, and other gets into really on a day-to-day planning. So, so probably I'll not be able to add further here, Dr. Rakesh.
All right, anyone who can add from the panelists?
So, Dr. Singh, I'll like to just add quickly. I think the future is DDMRP with a right blend of IBP. But I will agree with Sanjay over here. This is not the right time, I would say. We are still firefighting. We are coming out of hopefully soon from a lockdown. And looking at this rarest of the rarest event, we are not sure how demand is going to bounce back, whether it will be a V or a U or a W. So we don't know how the demand curve is going to be. So the best is to be close to your customers, collaborate, do a lot of consensus with which a lot of my panelists talked about. There we stay close to our sales and marketing teams. We stay close to our customers, and take baby steps at this point of time till our entire planning gets back on track.
Can anyone else like to attempt this? Pankaj, you have been seeing a lot of IBP in your earlier organization. Any views on that?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of taking everybody together, and this is the time when the both ends of supply chain have to be together. And maybe there are solutions available, like we have found out in our case that if the supply chain of a particular brand is disrupted, and given the customer behavior, is there any opportunity for a different brand, alternate brand, or our own brand? So to me it is a huge opportunity to come together and agree on a plan that one can execute. Only when you add the perspectives from different parts of the value chain can you find a better solution in this particular situation. So I will strongly suggest that more you interact with different parts of the value chain, better it is going to be for you to find a solution for your value chain.
Thank you, Pankaj. I think that really sums up well, because IBP is understood to be another process. It is a cultural change of bringing all the functions together. They see same schedules and part, and this is why what Shashank was talking in terms of visibility or replenishment would require a very strong connected planning, not only in terms of IT connectedness, but connectedness in terms of each and every function that works together. If you look at this in retail, the supplier has to do what the merchandiser wants. Merchandiser, has to do what the distribution wants, and the distribution and logistics have to work together. And I think coming together is a cultural change, moving away from silos, creating a managerial platform for managing your supply chain. Planning is very important, because one thing that is missing is that when you start working in your silos, and during pandemic it could be disastrous, maybe some people are coming together in a way this way. So what I suggest and what I would feel is that whether DDMRP as an approach or not, but IBP plays a very big role in a consensus planning, coming together, understanding each and every problem in production, in sourcing, in manufacturing, and in other things, and then looking at fulfilling the demand with available resources. What Sanjay said in terms of changes that they saw in the supply base that could be put and aligned to the production planning. Production planning could say what would be the capacity constraint, or what would be the product constraint or category constraint. I think the future definitely is going to be IBP with ITP, integrated tactical planning, which can be DDMRP, replenishment, Kanban, and whatever it is. And the long-term view can also be taken, because we need to take long-term view. Look at, if Indian economy is to grow by 1.9%, which is critical for us to take it for 1 year, and we cannot do just short run. So this is my view, and I think with this I will close the webinar. I thank all my speakers, Sanjay Awasthi, Pankaj Shete, Kunal Gupta, Shashank Raodeo, and Vickram Srivastava. All of you have been fabulous, and thank you for supporting ISCM, and thanks a lot. And all the other questions that we have not been able to answer, we'll get back to you with some replies. So thank you for supporting us, and all the attendees, thank you for being here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Have a nice day. Bye.
Stay safe.
And I would also like to thank you very much, Dr. Singh. And also a big shout out to SAP for backing us in this endeavor. Thank you, SAP, for being a support in helping us organize this. Look forward to seeing all of you soon. We have a list of your questions. We will see how we can quickly come back to you on that. Meanwhile, please do visit scmpro-knowledge.in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kunal. Thank you, Pankaj.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Stay safe.
Thanks, Dr. Rakesh.
Yeah, thank you.